Chapter 1: The Promise. Linda Fairmont swirled the last sip of Merlot in her glass, watching the city lights flicker through her apartment window like restless fireflies. The hum of traffic below was constant, a mechanical heartbeat that never slept. She had once thought the sound meant success, proof she had made it out of her small town and into the world of opportunity. Now it just sounded like noise. Her MBA diploma hung on the wall, framed in sleek black. Supply chain management had seemed glamorous in theory. Global networks, efficiency models, the thrill of optimization. In practice, it was spreadsheets, endless meetings, and a commute that ate hours of her life. The city was expensive, crowded, and gray. She missed the smell of fresh-cut hay, the way stars looked when they weren't competing with neon signs. Her phone buzzed. "Grandma." Linda smiled and answered. "Hey, Grandma." "Linda, honey." Her grandmother's voice was warm but heavy, like bread dough that hadn't quite risen. "I hate to bother you, but another family filed for bankruptcy today. The Millers lost their farm." Linda closed her eyes. "Oh no, it's getting worse," Grandma continued. "Your grandpa's worried. I'm worried. We've held on this long, but..." A pause. "I don't know how much longer." Linda gripped the stem of her glass. "I'll figure something out. Sweetheart, you've got your own life. I don't expect..." "No." Linda's voice sharpened with resolve. "I mean it. I'll come up with something." There was silence on the line, then a soft sigh. "You always were stubborn." Linda laughed faintly. "Runs in the family." They talked a little longer. Weather, gossip, the usual. But the weight of that promise settled on Linda's shoulders like a winter coat. When she hung up, the city felt even colder. Chapter 2: The Epiphany. Linda woke to the sound of her alarm and the faint hum of traffic outside her apartment window. The city was already alive. Horns blaring, engines growling, the distant wail of a siren cutting through the morning air. She lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying last night's conversation with Grandma. The Millers, bankruptcy, the slow death of her hometown. She swung her legs out of bed and padded to the kitchen, brewing coffee strong enough to jolt her into action. Today was just another day at work. Emails, meetings, supply chain forecasts, but the weight of that promise clung to her like a second skin. By the time she clocked out, the winter sun was already dipping behind the skyline. Linda decided to stop by the grocery store on her way home, mostly out of habit. She needed olive oil, maybe some fresh herbs for dinner. The store was crowded, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, carts squeaking against linoleum. Linda moved through the aisles with practiced efficiency, produce, dairy, bread, until she reached the baking section. And that's when it happened. She stood in front of a wall of spices, rows upon rows of tiny glass jars lined up like soldiers. Cinnamon, paprika, garlic powder, onion flakes. She reached for a jar of onion powder, turning it in her hand. The ingredients list was laughably simple. Dehydrated onions. That was it. She frowned, picking up another jar, garlic and herb blend. Same story. No chemicals, no fillers. Just dried vegetables and herbs. Linda's pulse quickened. Her hometown could grow all of this. They already did. Garlic, onions, peppers, heck, even basil and oregano in greenhouses. She imagined the farms working together, pooling resources, creating something bigger than themselves. A spice company. A town-owned cooperative. Her MBA brain lit up like a Christmas tree. Supply chains. Distribution networks. Branding. She could handle the paperwork, the logistics. They had the land, the knowledge, the grit. All they needed was a plan. Linda stared at the jars, her reflection warped in the glass. People paid premium prices for organic and farm-to-table. Why not farm-to-spice rack? She grabbed a jar of paprika and whispered, "This could work." A woman beside her glanced over, eyebrows raised. Linda smiled awkwardly and shoved the jar back on the shelf. By the time she got home, Linda was buzzing with energy. She tossed her groceries on the counter, barely remembering to put the milk in the fridge before flipping open her laptop. Legal forms, market research, potential clients. She devoured it all like a starving woman at a buffet. Grocery chains, restaurants, boutique food shops, there was a market for this. A big one. She scribbled ideas on a notepad, Heartland Harvest. Prairie Spice Company. True Roots. None of them felt perfect yet, but the name would come. It had to feel like trust, like quality, like home. Linda pulled up a spreadsheet and started mapping out costs, dehydrators, grinders, packaging. She calculated margins, projected revenue, even drafted a rough supply chain model. Hours slipped by unnoticed. The city outside faded into a blur of headlights and sirens, but Linda barely looked up. For the first time in months, she felt alive. At midnight, she sat back, rubbing her eyes. Her laptop screen glowed with possibility. Tomorrow she'd drive home. Tomorrow she'd start saving her town. The next morning, Linda packed a small overnight bag and loaded it into her car. The highway stretched ahead like a ribbon of gray, leading her back to the place she had once been so eager to leave. As the miles rolled by, the city skyline gave way to open fields, barns, and silos. The air smelled different here, cleaner, sharper, tinged with earth. Linda cracked her window and breathed deep, a smile tugging at her lips. She passed the old railroad tracks, rusted and silent, a ghost of what used to be. Her chest tightened. This was why she was here. This was what she had to fix. When she pulled into her parents' driveway, the porch light was on, casting a warm glow against the winter dusk. Her mother appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Linda. Her mom's voice was bright with surprise. What are you doing here? Linda grinned, stepping out of the car. Thought I'd come home for a bit. Her dad emerged behind her mom, eyebrows raised. City girl back in the sticks, huh? Linda laughed. Don't get used to it. Inside, the house smelled like roast beef and mashed potatoes. Comfort food. Home. They sat around the kitchen table, plates steaming, as Linda laid out her idea. She spoke fast, words tumbling over each other. Spice blends, dehydrators, greenhouses, supply chains. Her parents exchanged looks. Her dad scratched his chin. Sounds ambitious. Her mom frowned. You really think people will pay for that? Yes, Linda said firmly. Organic, chemical-free, locally sourced. It's what people want. Her dad leaned back. Even if you're right, getting everyone on board won't be easy. Linda nodded. I know. That's why I need a town hall meeting. Tomorrow night. At the courthouse. Her mom hesitated, then sighed. I'll call around. Linda smiled, relief washing over her. Thanks, Mom. As she cleared her plate, her phone buzzed with a text from Grandma. Heard you're home. Can't wait to see what you've got up your sleeve. Linda typed back. You'll see tomorrow. Promise. Chapter 3, The Return. Linda woke early, the winter light spilling through the curtains of her childhood bedroom. It was strange being back. The floral wallpaper, the creaky floorboards, the faint scent of lavender from the sachets her mother tucked into drawers. Everything felt smaller than she remembered, like the house had shrunk while she was away. She dressed quickly, pulling on jeans and a soft sweater, and padded down the hall to the kitchen. Her mom was already there, humming as she flipped pancakes. Morning, city girl, her dad said from behind the newspaper. Linda grinned, pouring herself coffee. Morning, country folk. Her mom slid a plate in front of her. Eat. You'll need your strength if you're planning to convince half the town tonight. Linda took a bite, savoring the buttery sweetness. Thanks, Mom. And thanks for calling everyone. Her mom shrugged. People are curious and worried. You'll have a full house. Linda's stomach fluttered. A full house meant pressure. A full house meant no turning back. The day passed in a blur of preparation. Linda tweaked her PowerPoint, printed handouts, and rehearsed her pitch until the words felt like second nature. She wanted to sound confident, even if her insides were doing somersaults. By late afternoon, she drove into town, the courthouse rising ahead like a sentinel in the square. The building was old, white columns, brick steps, a clock tower that had seen better days. Linda parked and sat for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. You've got this, she whispered to herself. Inside, the meeting room buzzed with voices. Folding chairs lined up in neat rows, every seat filled. Farmers in flannel, retirees in cardigans, a few younger faces she didn't recognize. The air smelled faintly of coffee and anticipation. Linda set up her laptop at the front, the projector casting her first slide onto the wall. A new future. Heartland Spice Cooperative. She turned, scanning the crowd. Familiar faces smiled back. Mrs. Jenkins from the bakery, old Mr. Carter who used to sell sweet corn by the roadside, and then her gaze snagged on someone near the back. A man stood, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a worn flannel shirt and jeans. His jaw was strong, shadowed with a two-day stubble, and his dark hair curled slightly at the ends. He looked like he belonged in a magazine spread titled Rugged Americana. Linda's pulse skipped. He caught her glance and nodded, a quiet acknowledgement before sitting down. Linda cleared her throat. Thank you all for coming. I know things have been hard lately, harder than any of us imagined. Farms closing, families leaving. But I believe we can change that. She clicked to the next slide. Supply chain diagrams, colorful charts. What if we worked together? What if we created a cooperative focused on spices and herbs? Everything from onions and garlic to basil and oregano. We grow, dehydrate, grind, and package. No chemicals, no shortcuts, just fresh, honest flavor. Murmurs rippled through the room. Linda pressed on, her voice steady. People pay premium prices for organic, locally sourced products. There's a growing market for healthy alternatives. We have the land, the knowledge, the grit. All we need is a plan, and I have one. She walked them through the details, cost projections, potential clients, branding ideas. When she finished, the room was silent. Linda's heart thudded. Silence could mean anything. Then, from the back, the man in flannel stood. I'm Alan Howard, he said, his voice deep and even. I run the greenhouse out on County Road 12. Heads turned. People nodded. Clearly, they knew him. Alan looked around the room, then back at Linda. I think she's right. A ripple of surprise. Alan continued, his tone calm but firm. We've all been fighting alone, and it's not working. If we do nothing, we already know how that story ends. Bankruptcy, empty fields, More families leaving. He paused, scanning the faces around him. I don't want to hear about the next one of my friends losing their farm. I vote we give this crazy idea a chance. Even if it doesn't work, at least we tried. The room erupted in chatter, agreement, skepticism, questions. Linda exhaled slowly, relief washing over her. Alan caught her eye again, and for a moment, it felt like the room faded away. After the meeting, Linda packed up her laptop, her hands still trembling from adrenaline. People lingered, chatting in small clusters. A few came up to shake her hand, offer cautious encouragement. She was sliding her laptop into its case when a shadow fell across the table. Good presentation, Alan said. Linda looked up, startled. Up close, he was even more striking, warm brown eyes, a smile that was more suggestion than certainty. Thanks, she managed. And, thank you for speaking up. That meant a lot. Alan shrugged. Someone had to. Linda smiled faintly. You didn't have to volunteer. I didn't, he said, his gaze steady. But I believe in community, and I hate watching good people lose everything. Linda nodded, her throat tight. Me too. He gave her a thoughtful look before smiling with a nod and excusing himself. As Linda drove home under a sky full of stars, her mind whirled. Not just with supply chains and spice blends, but with the image of Alan Howard standing in that room, his voice steady, his eyes meeting hers like they shared a secret. For the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel like a spreadsheet. It felt like possibility. Chapter 4: The Town Hall Aftermath. The courthouse emptied slowly, like a jar of honey tipped on its side, thick, reluctant, and leaving behind a sticky residue of chatter. Linda stood near the front, laptop bag slung over her shoulder, watching clusters of townsfolk linger in animated conversation. Some faces were bright with hope, others furrowed with skepticism, but at least they were talking. That was something. She exhaled, her pulse finally settling after the adrenaline rush of presenting. Her PowerPoint slides were packed away, but the weight of what she'd started was only beginning to press down. Fairmont. Linda turned to see Mrs. Jenkins bustling toward her, cheeks flushed from excitement. The bakery owner was a whirlwind of floral prints and opinions. That was quite the show, Mrs. Jenkins declared, gripping Linda's arm like they were old conspirators. Spices, you say? I could use some fresh cinnamon for my rolls. The store-bought stuff tastes like sawdust. Linda smiled. That's the idea. Better quality, straight from local farms. Mrs. Jenkins leaned in, lowering her voice as if sharing state secrets. You'll need branding, something catchy, something that makes people think of home and flavor and, oh, maybe a slogan. Spice up your life. Linda bit back a laugh. I'll keep that in mind. Before Mrs. Jenkins could launch into a full marketing campaign, a deep voice cut through the hum of conversation. Fairmont. Linda turned, and there he was, Alan Howard. Flannel shirt, worn jeans, that easy confidence that made him look like he belonged in every room he walked into. He had a way of standing, shoulders relaxed, hands in his pockets. That said, he wasn't in a hurry, even when everyone else was. Mrs. Jenkins gave him a look that could curdle milk. Howard. Alan tipped his head politely. Ma'am. She sniffed and swept away, muttering something about cinnamon rolls. Linda raised an eyebrow. Friend of yours. Alan's mouth curved in a half-smile. Depends on the day. Linda laughed, tension easing. Thanks for speaking up back there. You probably saved me from getting run out of town. Alan shrugged. You had good points. Still, Linda said, slinging her bag over her shoulder. It meant a lot. Alan studied her for a moment, his gaze steady. You're serious about this? Linda nodded. Completely. Then you'll need help. Linda blinked. Help? Alan's smile widened just enough to make her pulse skip. You've got the business plan. I've got greenhouses and experience with herbs. Seems like a good start. Linda tilted her head, teasing. Sounds like a partnership. Sounds like trouble? Alan countered, his tone dry but warm. Linda grinned. The good kind, I hope. Alan's eyes glinted. Guess we'll find out. They walked out together into the crisp night air. The courthouse steps creaked under their boots, and the town square stretched quiet and familiar. Brick storefronts, lampposts casting golden pools of light, the old clock tower ticking away like it had for 100 years. Linda hugged her coat tighter. I forgot how cold it gets here. Alan glanced at her, amusement flickering in his eyes. City girl lost her edge? City girl never had an edge, Linda admitted. Just overpriced coffee and a lot of concrete. Alan chuckled, a low sound that warmed the air between them. You'll get used to it again. Linda hesitated, then asked, why did you speak up? Really? Alan's smile faded into something quieter. Because I'm tired of watching good people lose everything. My dad used to say a farm isn't just land. It's history, family. You let that die, you lose more than crops. Linda swallowed hard. I get that. Alan looked at her, his gaze steady. Do you? Linda met his eyes. My grandparents are hanging on by a thread. If this doesn't work. She trailed off, the weight of it pressing down. Alan nodded slowly. Then let's make it work. They reached Linda's car, parked under a lamppost. She unlocked the door, then turned back to him. Tomorrow, she said, I'll start drafting contracts. We'll need to figure out crop rotations, greenhouse schedules. Alan held up a hand, grinning. Slow down, Fairmont. Rome wasn't built in a day. Linda smirked. Neither was a spice empire. Alan laughed, and for a moment, the night felt lighter. See you tomorrow, he said, stepping back. Linda slid into her car, heart thudding as she watched him walk away. His stride was easy, confident, like he belonged to this town in a way she never quite had. As she drove home under a sky full of stars, Linda's mind whirled, not just with supply chains and branding, but with the image of Alan Howard standing in that room, his voice steady, his eyes meeting hers like they shared a secret. For the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel like a spreadsheet. It felt like possibility. Chapter 5, First Sparks. Linda's phone buzzed at 7:30 a.m. sharp. She was halfway through her first cup of coffee, still in pajamas, when she saw the name on the screen, Alan Howard. She hesitated for a beat. Why did her stomach flip like that? Then answered. Morning, Alan said, his voice warm and annoyingly chipper for someone who probably woke up before dawn. You free today? Linda blinked. Define free. Not stuck in a city office. Not buried under spreadsheets. Free enough to get your boots dirty. Linda laughed. I own boots. Somewhere. Find them, Alan said. Meet me at the greenhouse in an hour. We've got work to do. Before she could protest, he hung up. Linda stared at her phone, then at her coffee. Well, she muttered. So much for a slow morning. The greenhouse sat on the edge of town, a long structure of glass and steel shimmering under the winter sun. Inside, the air was warm and fragrant, heavy with the scent of basil, thyme, and something citrusy Linda couldn't name. Alan was waiting by a row of planters, sleeves rolled up, forearms dusted with soil. Linda tried not to notice the way his shirt clung to his shoulders. Tried and failed. You made it, he said, flashing a grin that could probably sell 1,000 spice jars. Linda held up her boots, which were clearly city fashionable and not farm approved. Don't laugh. Alan chuckled. I'll try. She slipped them on and stepped inside, immediately sinking into a patch of damp earth. Okay. Maybe laugh a little. Alan smirked. You'll learn. He led her down the rows, explaining the greenhouse setup, temperature controls, irrigation systems, crop rotation schedules. Linda listened, fascinated despite herself. So, Alan said, stopping by a tray of seedlings, you want to build a spice empire. That means understanding what you're selling. Linda crouched beside him, peering at the tiny green shoots. They're cute. Alan raised an eyebrow. Cute. Adorable, Linda corrected, grinning. Like baby herbs. Alan shook his head, amused. City girl vocabulary. Linda laughed, brushing soil from her hands. Fine. They're efficient units of agricultural production. Better, Alan said, his eyes glinting. They spent the next hour transplanting seedlings, Linda fumbling with the delicate roots while Alan worked with easy precision. At one point, Linda knocked over an entire tray of oregano, sending dirt cascading onto the floor. Oh no, she gasped, scrambling to scoop up the mess. Alan crouched beside her, his shoulder brushing hers. Relax. Happens all the time. Linda glanced up and froze. His face was inches from hers, eyes warm, lips curved in that infuriating half-smile. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to the space between them. Then Alan straightened, breaking the spell. You owe me a tray of oregano. Linda exhaled, forcing a laugh. Put it on my tab. By noon, they were both dusty and hungry. Alan suggested lunch at the diner, and Linda didn't argue, mostly because her stomach growled loud enough to make a passing farmer chuckle. The diner was a time capsule of chrome and vinyl, the kind of place where the coffee never stopped flowing and the pie case gleamed like a shrine. They slid into a booth, and before Linda could open a menu, the waitress appeared. A woman in her 60s with a beehive hairdo and an attitude sharp enough to slice bread. Well, she said, eyeing Alan. Howard, bringing a lady around? Thought you were married to that greenhouse. Alan smirked. Nice to see you too, Marlene. Marlene turned to Linda, her gaze sweeping from head to toe. You're not from around here. Linda smiled politely. Used to be. Moved back. Marlene sniffed. City girl, huh? Hope you like mud. Linda grinned. I'm learning. Marlene's eyes twinkled. Good. Howard needs someone to keep him in line. Alan groaned. Marlene, coffee? She interrupted, already pouring. Linda bit back a laugh as Alan muttered something about small-town gossip. Over burgers and fries, they talked business, crop schedules, packaging options, potential clients. But between the spreadsheets and strategy, there were moments that felt different. Like when Alan teased her about her manicure, you'll ruin those nails in a week, and Linda shot back about his flannel obsession. Do you own any shirts without plaid? Or when their hands brushed reaching for the ketchup, and Linda felt a spark that had nothing to do with static electricity. By the time they left the diner, Linda's cheeks hurt from smiling. Outside, the sky was streaked with pink and gold, the kind of sunset you couldn't buy in the city. Linda paused, breathing it in. Beautiful, she murmured. Alan glanced at her. Not the sky, her. And for a moment his expression softened. Yeah, he said quietly. It is. Linda's heart did a ridiculous little flip. As she drove home, her phone buzzed with a text from Alan. Good work today. Try not to kill any more oregano. Linda laughed out loud, typing back. No promises. She tossed her phone onto the passenger seat, her smile lingering. This was supposed to be about saving the town. About spreadsheets and supply chains. So why did it suddenly feel like something more? Chapter 6, Building Bridges. Linda's dining table looked like a war zone. Papers were spread everywhere, contracts, crop rotation charts, cost projections. Her laptop hummed quietly, displaying a spreadsheet that had more tabs than a piano. She rubbed her temples. Okay, Fairmont. You wanted to save the town. This is what saving looks like. Her phone buzzed. Alan again. Howard. You alive under that paperwork? Linda, barely. Howard, town hall at 3. Farmers want details. Bring your charts. And coffee. Lots of coffee. Linda groaned, shoving her hair into a messy bun. Charts and coffee. Got it. The town hall was buzzing when she arrived, arms full of binders and a thermos big enough to caffeinate a small army. Farmers clustered in groups, boots muddy, voices loud. The air smelled faintly of hay and determination. Alan was at the front, leaning against the podium like he owned the place. He spotted her and grinned. Fairmont, you brought reinforcements. Linda held up the thermos. Liquid courage. Good, Alan said. You'll need it. The meeting started with questions. Lots of them. How do we split profits? Who decides what crops we grow? What about packaging costs? Linda fielded each one with calm precision, flipping through charts and explaining the cooperative model. Alan chimed in occasionally, his voice steady, his presence grounding her like an anchor in a storm. But then came the curveball. Old Mr. Carter raised a hand. What about branding? You can't just slap spices on a jar and expect folks to buy it. Linda opened her mouth, then closed it. He wasn't wrong. Alan smirked. Guess we need a name that sticks. Mrs. Jenkins piped up from the back. Spice up your life. Linda bit back a laugh. Noted. Someone else shouted. Heartland Harvest. Another. Prairie Gold. Soon the room was a chorus of suggestions, some creative, some questionable. Flavor Explosion earned a collective groan. Linda scribbled furiously, trying to keep up. Alan leaned over, murmuring. If someone suggests sexy spices, I'm leaving. Linda snorted, choking on her coffee. Don't tempt them. After 2 hours, they had a tentative plan. Crop assignments, greenhouse schedules, and a short list of names. The farmers left in high spirits, some slapping Alan on the back, others giving Linda nods of approval. When the room finally emptied, Linda collapsed into a chair. I think my brain melted. Alan sat across from her, looking annoyingly fresh for someone who'd just wrangled 30 opinions. You did good. Linda groaned. I did something. Alan's smile softened. You got them talking. That's half the battle. Linda met his gaze, and for a moment, the noise of the day faded. His eyes were warm, steady, like he believed in her even when she didn't. She cleared her throat, breaking the spell. Next step, contracts. Alan grinned. Next step, lunch. You look like you need pie. Linda laughed. Pie sounds like salvation. The diner was quieter this time, just a few regulars nursing coffee. Marlene, the waitress with the beehive hairdo, spotted them and smirked. Well, she said, setting down menus. Howard and the city girl, back again. Should I start planning the wedding? Linda nearly inhaled her water. Excuse me? Alan chuckled, utterly unfazed. Ignore her. Marlene winked. Can't ignore destiny, sweetheart. Linda buried her face in the menu, cheeks flaming. Alan leaned back, clearly enjoying her discomfort. You okay over there? He teased. Linda peeked over the menu. Do all small towns come with a side of matchmaking? Alan's grin widened. Pretty much. They ordered pie, apple for Linda, pecan for Alan, and spent the next hour hashing out logistics between bites. But every so often, their conversation drifted. Movies they liked, childhood memories, the weirdest thing they'd ever eaten. Linda learned Alan hated sushi. Raw fish? No thanks, and secretly loved old westerns. Alan learned Linda once tried to make macarons and ended up with something resembling colorful hockey pucks. By the time they left, Linda's cheeks hurt from laughing. Outside, the sky was bruised purple, stars pricking through the dusk. Alan walked her to her car, hands shoved in his pockets. You're doing good, Fairmont, he said quietly. Linda smiled. So are you. Alan's gaze lingered, something unspoken flickering in his eyes. For a heartbeat, Linda wondered if she stepped closer, if she said something. But then he cleared his throat, breaking the moment. See you tomorrow? Linda nodded, her voice softer than she intended. Tomorrow. As she drove home, her phone buzzed with a text. Howard, don't forget to eat dinner. Pie doesn't count. Linda, bossy. Howard, efficient. Linda, good night, Alan. Howard, night, Fairmont. Linda set the phone down, her smile lingering. This was supposed to be about saving the town. About contracts and crops. So why did it feel like something else was growing? Something wild and unexpected like basil in winter? Chapter 7 Growing Pains. Linda stared at the industrial dehydrator like it was a spaceship. The machine gleamed under the fluorescent lights of Alan's greenhouse annex, humming softly as if mocking her confidence. This, Alan said, patting the side of the dehydrator, is where the magic happens. Linda crossed her arms. Magic or chaos? Alan grinned. Depends on who's running it. Linda shot him a look. You're implying I can't handle a dehydrator? Alan's eyes twinkled. I'm implying you've never handled one. Linda huffed, stepping closer. How hard can it be? You slice, you dry, you grind. Done. Alan chuckled, leaning against the counter. Sure, easy. Until you overload the trays, mess up the temperature, and end up with something that smells like burnt regret. Linda narrowed her eyes. Watch and learn, Howard. The first test batch was simple, onions and garlic. Linda arranged the slices neatly, feeling smug as she slid the trays into place. Temperature set, she announced, pressing the button with flourish. Alan raised an eyebrow. You sure about that setting? Linda waved him off. I read the manual. Alan smirked. Reading and doing aren't the same thing. Linda ignored him, focusing on the rhythmic hum of the machine. For a moment, everything felt under control. Until it didn't. The smell hit first, sharp, acrid, like someone had set fire to a salad. Linda's eyes widened. Oh no. Alan sniffed the air, fighting a laugh. That's bold. Linda yanked open the dehydrator door, coughing as a cloud of smoke billowed out. The onion slices were charred black, the garlic reduced to brittle shards. Linda groaned. Okay, maybe I misread the manual. Alan grinned, stepping closer. You think. Linda shot him a glare, cheeks flaming. Don't say it. Alan held up his hands, mock innocent. I wasn't going to. Linda narrowed her eyes. You were absolutely going to. Alan chuckled, his voice warm. Fine, I'll keep my mouth shut. But only because you look like you might throw a tray at me. Linda laughed despite herself, the tension easing. I was aiming for artisanal. Ended up with apocalypse. Alan's smile softened. Happens to everyone. First batch is always a disaster. Linda sighed, brushing soot from her hands. I hate failing. Alan's gaze lingered, steady and quiet. You didn't fail. You learned. Linda met his eyes, something unspoken passing between them. For a moment, the greenhouse felt smaller, the hum of the machine fading into the background. They cleaned up together, laughter breaking through the frustration. At one point, Linda accidentally smeared garlic soot across her cheek, and Alan reached out without thinking, his thumb brushing her skin. The touch was brief, barely a second, but it sent a jolt through Linda like static electricity. She froze, breath catching. Alan seemed to realize what he'd done, his hand dropping quickly. Sorry. Linda swallowed hard. It's fine. But it wasn't fine. It was something. By late afternoon, they had a second batch in the dehydrator, this time under Alan's supervision. The slices dried perfectly, crisp and fragrant. Linda inhaled deeply, relief washing over her. Smells like victory, she said. Alan grinned. Smells like teamwork. Linda rolled her eyes. Don't get smug. Alan chuckled. Too late. They packed the dried onions and garlic into jars, labeling them with temporary stickers. Linda held one up, admiring the golden flakes. Not bad, she said. For a day that started with burnt regret. Alan smiled. Told you we'd get there. Linda glanced at him, her heart doing that ridiculous flip again. Thanks for not letting me burn down your greenhouse. Alan's voice was quiet, almost teasing. Anytime. As they locked up, the sky outside was streaked with orange and pink, the kind of sunset that made Linda ache with nostalgia. Alan walked her to her car, hands shoved in his pockets. Tomorrow we try basil. Linda groaned. Pray for me. Alan's grin was slow, warm. Always. Linda blinked, caught off guard by the softness in his tone. Before she could respond, he stepped back, giving her space. Drive safe, Fairmont. Linda slid into her car, her pulse still racing. As she drove home, her phone buzzed with a text. Howard, no apocalypse tomorrow. Okay? Linda, no promises. Howard, you're trouble. Linda, the good kind. She tossed the phone aside, smiling into the twilight. This wasn't just about spices anymore. Something else was simmering, slow, steady, impossible to ignore. Chapter 8, the festival. The town square had transformed overnight. Strings of lights crisscrossed above the cobblestones, casting a warm glow over booths laden with pumpkins, jars of preserves, and pies that looked like works of art. The annual Harvest Festival was the kind of event Linda had forgotten existed, where everyone knew everyone, and strangers were treated like family. She stood near the spice booth she'd helped set up, adjusting jars of dried basil and oregano until they gleamed under the lights. A hand-painted sign read, Heartland Spice Company. Taste the difference. It wasn't the final name, they were still debating that. But it would do for now. Linda smoothed her sweater, scanning the crowd. Families laughed near the hayrides. Kids darted past with caramel apples. And the air smelled like cinnamon and nostalgia. For the first time since she'd moved back, Linda felt happy. Fairmont. She turned, and there he was, Alan Howard, looking unfairly good in a navy button-down and jeans. His sleeves rolled up like he'd just finished wrestling a tractor. "You clean up nice," Linda said before she could stop herself. Alan's grin was slow, teasing. "You too. City girl goes country chic." Linda laughed, brushing a stray hair from her face. "How's the greenhouse?" "Jealous," Alan said. "It wanted to come to the festival." Linda rolled her eyes. "You're ridiculous." Alan leaned against the booth, his presence grounding her like always. "Looks good," he said, nodding at the jars. "You did this." Linda's chest warmed. "We did this." Business was brisk. People stopped to sample spice blends, ask questions, and place pre-orders. Linda explained the cooperative model at least 20 times, her voice growing hoarse but her heart soaring. This was working. Halfway through, Mrs. Jenkins appeared, clutching a tray of cinnamon rolls like a peace offering. "Thought you two could use some sugar," she said, eyes twinkling. Linda accepted a roll gratefully. "Thanks, Mrs. Jenkins." Mrs. Jenkins leaned closer, lowering her voice. "You know, Alan's a good man. Hardworking. Single." Linda nearly choked on her bite. "Oh, good to know." Mrs. Jenkins winked. "Just saying." Alan returned with a stack of flyers, oblivious to the matchmaking attempt. Linda focused on her cinnamon roll like it was a lifeline. As dusk settled, music drifted from the bandstand. A lively tune that had couples spinning under the fairy lights. Linda watched, a pang of longing tugging at her chest. She hadn't danced in years. "Come on," Alan said suddenly, holding out a hand. Linda blinked. "What? Dance with me?" Linda laughed nervously. "I haven't danced since college." Alan's smile was easy, confident. "Then you're overdue." Before she could protest, his hand closed around hers, warm, steady, and he led her toward the bandstand. The music was upbeat, the rhythm infectious. Linda stumbled at first, her city feet clumsy on the cobblestones, but Alan's grip was sure, guiding her with effortless grace. "Relax," he murmured, his breath brushing her ear. "It's just a dance." Linda swallowed hard, her pulse skittering. Just a dance. Except it didn't feel like just anything. His hand at her waist, the way his eyes caught hers and held, like the world had narrowed to this moment, this song, this man. She laughed, breathless, as he spun her under the lights. "You're good at this." Alan grinned. "Don't sound so surprised." Linda shook her head, smiling despite herself. "I'm impressed." "Careful," Alan teased. "You'll ruin your reputation as a skeptic." Linda laughed again, the sound mingling with the music. For a few minutes, everything else, contracts, deadlines, doubts, faded away. When the song ended, they stood close, too close, the air charged with something Linda didn't dare name. Then disaster. A voice rang out from the crowd. "Well, if it isn't the happy couple." Linda froze. Alan stiffened. She turned to see Marlene, the diner waitress, grinning like a cat with cream. Knew it was only a matter of time. Linda's cheeks flamed. "We're not." Alan cleared his throat. "Marlene." But Marlene was already bustling off, spreading the news like wildfire. Linda groaned. "Great. Now the whole town thinks we're..." Alan's eyes glinted with amusement. "Could be worse." Linda shot him a look. "How?" Alan's grin widened. "They could think we hate each other." Linda laughed despite herself, tension easing. "You're impossible." Alan's voice softened. "You don't seem to mind." Linda blinked, her heart doing that ridiculous flip again. Before she could respond, someone called Alan's name, pulling him away. As Linda walked back to the booth, her mind whirled. The dance, the touch, the way he looked at her like she was more than a business partner. This was supposed to be about saving the town, about spices and spreadsheets. So why did it feel like something else entirely? Chapter 9, The Setback. Linda's phone buzzed just as she was finishing her second cup of coffee. She glanced at the screen, expecting a text from Alan. Maybe another teasing remark about her oregano massacre. But instead, it was an email notification. Subject line: order cancellation, Greenleaf Organics. Linda's stomach dropped. Greenleaf Organics was their biggest potential client, the one she'd been counting on to validate the entire cooperative. She clicked the email, scanning the words that felt like a punch to the gut. "After careful consideration, we've decided to source spices from an established supplier. Thank you for your proposal." Linda stared at the screen, her pulse thudding in her ears. Established supplier. Translation: we don't trust you. She sank into a chair, the weight of it pressing down like a storm cloud. Without Greenleaf, their revenue projections were shredded. The farmers were counting on her. Her grandparents were counting on her. And she was failing. By the time she reached the greenhouse, Alan was already there, stacking trays of basil like nothing was wrong. Linda clutched her phone, her throat tight. "They backed out," she blurted. Alan looked up, brows knitting. Who? Greenleaf, our biggest client. Linda shoved the phone at him. Just like that. Gone. Alan scanned the email, his jaw tightening. Damn. Linda paced, words tumbling out. This was supposed to be the anchor account. The one that made everyone believe this could work. Without them. Hey. Alan's voice cut through her spiral, calm and steady. We'll figure it out. Linda stopped, staring at him. How? We don't have backup. We don't have. Her voice cracked. I promised them, Alan. I promised my grandmother we'd save the farm. Alan stepped closer, his presence grounding her like always. You're not alone in this. Linda shook her head, frustration burning behind her eyes. I should have seen this coming. I should have. Alan reached out, his hand closing gently around her wrist. Fairmont. Linda froze, her breath hitching. His touch was warm, steady, and when she met his eyes, the world narrowed to that quiet intensity. You're allowed to be upset, Alan said softly, but don't you dare give up. Linda swallowed hard, her pulse skittering. I don't know if I can fix this. Alan's voice was low, certain. Then we'll fix it together. For a moment, neither of them moved. The hum of the greenhouse filled the silence, mingling with the scent of basil and something electric between them. Then Alan let go, stepping back like he'd just remembered gravity. First step, call the others. Be honest. They need to hear it from you. Linda nodded, her throat tight. Right? The town hall that afternoon was tense. Farmers sat in folding chairs, boots muddy, faces grim. Linda stood at the front, her notes trembling in her hands. They backed out, she said, voice steady despite the knot in her chest. Greenleaf won't be placing an order. A ripple of murmurs swept the room. Mrs. Jenkins clutched her cinnamon roll tray like a shield. Well, that's a kick in the pants. Linda forced a smile. It's a setback, not the end. We still have local markets, restaurants, and direct-to-consumer options. We can pivot. Old Mr. Carter grunted. Pivot sounds like city talk for we're doomed. Linda opened her mouth, but Alan beat her to it. She's right, he said, his voice carrying like a steady drumbeat. We knew this wouldn't be easy, but giving up now? That's not who we are. Heads turned. Alan stood tall, hands in his pockets, his gaze sweeping the room. We've got good product. We've got grit. And we've got Linda, who's been busting her tail to make this happen. So either we fight for this or we watch the town die. Your call. Silence. Then Mrs. Jenkins slapped her tray down with a thud. Well, I'm not letting my cinnamon rolls taste like sawdust. I'm in. Laughter rippled through the room, breaking the tension. One by one, heads nodded. Voices murmured agreement. Linda exhaled, relief washing over her like sunlight after rain. After the meeting, Linda stepped outside, the cold air biting her cheeks. Alan followed, his boots crunching on gravel. You didn't have to do that, she said quietly. Alan shrugged. Sure I did. Linda smiled faintly. You make it sound easy. Alan's gaze softened. It's not, but you're worth fighting for. Linda blinked, her breath catching. Alan. Before she could finish, a voice rang out from across the square. Well, if it isn't the power couple. Linda groaned. Marlene, of course. The woman had radar for romantic tension. Not a couple, Linda called back, cheeks flaming. Marlene winked. Sure, sweetheart. Keep telling yourself that. Alan chuckled, utterly unfazed. She's relentless. Linda laughed despite herself, the sound mingling with the winter wind. As she drove home, her phone buzzed with a text. Howard, tomorrow, we brainstorm new clients. No apocalypse allowed. Linda, deal. Howard, and Fairmont? Linda, yeah, Howard, you're doing better than you think. Linda stared at the screen, her heart doing that ridiculous flip again. Maybe Greenleaf was gone. Maybe the road ahead was harder than she imagined. But she wasn't alone. And that changed everything. Chapter 10, The Breakthrough. Linda sat at the long table in the back room of the diner, surrounded by farmers, charts, and enough coffee to fuel a small army. The brainstorming session had started an hour ago, and so far, the only viable idea was Mrs. Jenkins suggesting they just pray harder. Linda rubbed her temples. Okay, let's focus. We need new clients. Restaurants, specialty shops, online markets, anything. Alan leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, looking maddeningly calm. We'll find them. Linda shot him a look. Optimism is great, Howard, but optimism doesn't pay invoices. Alan's lips curved. Neither does panic. Linda opened her mouth to retort, but was interrupted by Marlene sweeping in with a tray of pie like a general delivering reinforcements. Thought you all could use sugar, she said, setting the tray down with a flourish. And Fairmont? You look like you're about to cry. Eat something before you scare the farmers. Linda groaned. Thanks, Marlene. Alan smirked. Pie solves everything. Linda muttered. If only. The meeting spiraled into chaos. Suggestions flew like popcorn. Sell at the gas station. Partner with the church bake sale. Start a TikTok. Linda scribbled furiously, trying to separate the gold from the glitter. Then, Halfway through a heated debate about whether cinnamon rolls counted as marketing, inspiration struck. Wait, she said, sitting up so fast her chair squeaked. Subscription boxes. The room went quiet. Linda's voice gained momentum. Think about it, monthly spice boxes. Curated blends, recipes, maybe even a little note about the farm it came from. People love that personal touch. We can ship nationwide. Alan's brows lifted. That's actually brilliant. Mrs. Jenkins clapped her hands. And we can include cinnamon rolls. Linda laughed. Sure, Mrs. Jenkins. Cinnamon rolls optional. Excitement buzzed through the room like electricity. Farmers nodded, voices rising in agreement. For the first time in days, hope felt tangible. Alan leaned closer, his voice low enough for only her to hear. You just saved this thing. Linda's pulse skittered. We saved it. Alan's eyes held hers, warm and steady. You're the spark, Fairmont. Linda swallowed hard, her heart doing that ridiculous flip again. By evening, the plan was in motion. Linda and Alan stayed behind to finalize details. The diner empty except for Marlene wiping down counters and humming like she knew every secret in town. Linda tapped at her laptop, exhaustion tugging at her bones, but adrenaline keeping her upright. We'll need packaging, a website, shipping logistics. Alan reached over, gently closing the laptop. Fairmont. Linda blinked. What? You've done enough for one day. His voice was soft, steady. Take a breath. Linda exhaled, realizing for the first time how tight her chest felt. I can't let this fail. Alan's gaze didn't waver. It won't. Linda laughed weakly. You sound so sure. Alan's smile was quiet, almost tender. Because I know you. You don't quit. Linda stared at him, the weight of his words sinking deep. Alan. He reached out, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. The touch was feather light, but it sent a shiver down her spine. For a moment, the world narrowed to the space between them. The hum of the diner, the scent of coffee and pie, the warmth in his eyes. I meant what I said, Alan murmured. You're worth fighting for. Linda's breath caught. Alan. Before she could finish, Marlene's voice rang out from behind the counter. Well, if you two are done making googly eyes, I've got chairs to stack. Linda jerked back, cheeks flaming. Alan chuckled, utterly unfazed. Timing, he muttered. Linda laughed, the tension breaking like a snapped string. We should go. Alan stood, offering his hand. Tomorrow we start building that website. Linda took his hand, her pulse racing. Tomorrow. As she drove home under a sky full of stars, her phone buzzed with a text. Howard. Subscription boxes. Genius. Linda, team effort. Howard, still. You're something else, Fairmont. Linda, good or bad? Howard, the best kind. Linda stared at the screen, her smile lingering. The breakthrough wasn't just about spices. It was about possibility. Wild, unexpected, and simmering like something ready to boil over. Chapter 11, the launch day dawned crisp and bright, the kind of morning that smelled like possibility and mild panic. Linda stood in the cooperative's makeshift packing room, surrounded by boxes, jars, and enough twine to hogtie a herd of cattle. This looked so much easier on paper, she muttered, wrestling with a stubborn roll of tape. Alan appeared at her elbow, grinning like he'd been waiting for this moment. Need a hand? Linda shot him a look. Unless you're secretly a tape whisperer, I doubt it. Alan plucked the roll from her fingers, tore a perfect strip, and sealed the box with one smooth motion. What was that about whispering? Linda narrowed her eyes. Show off. Alan's grin widened. You love it. Linda opened her mouth to retort, but was interrupted by Mrs. Jenkins bustling in with a tray of cinnamon rolls like a culinary cavalry. Fuel for the troops, she declared, setting the tray down with a thud. And don't you dare skip breakfast, Linda. You look paler than my pie crust. Linda laughed, grabbing a roll. Thanks, Mrs. Jenkins. Alan snagged one too, biting into it with a satisfied hum. Best part of this job. Mrs. Jenkins winked. Second best, I'd say. Linda nearly choked on her bite. Excuse me? Mrs. Jenkins sailed out before Linda could demand clarification, leaving Alan smirking like he knew exactly what she meant. The morning was chaos. Farmers streamed in with last-minute deliveries, labels jammed in the printer, and someone, Linda never figured out who, managed to spill an entire jar of paprika across the floor, turning the room into a crime scene of red dust. Looks festive, Alan said, surveying the mess. Linda groaned. Looks like a murder in a spice factory. Alan chuckled, grabbing a broom. Relax. We'll clean it up. Linda watched him sweep, muscles flexing under his shirt, and immediately looked away before her brain short-circuited. Focus, Fairmont. Boxes, labels, logistics, not forearms. By noon, the first batch of subscription boxes was stacked and ready for pickup. Linda stared at them, pride swelling in her chest. Each box was neat, tied with twine, and stamped with their temporary logo, Heartland Spice Company. We did it, she whispered. Alan stepped beside her, his voice low. You did it. Linda turned, meeting his gaze, and froze. His eyes were warm, steady, And for a heartbeat, the world narrowed to that look. Alan, she began, her voice barely a breath. And then chaos. The door burst open, and Marlene stormed in like a gossip grenade. Well, if it isn't the lovebirds making history. Linda jerked back, cheeks flaming. Marlene. Whole town's talking. Marlene continued, oblivious to Linda's mortification. Dancing at the festival, late-night meetings, subscription boxes. Sounds like foreplay with paperwork to me. Alan coughed into his fist, clearly fighting laughter. Linda buried her face in her hands. Marlene. Linda groaned. Please stop. Marlene winked. Don't worry, sweetheart. I'll save you a slice of wedding cake. She swept out, leaving Linda sputtering and Alan grinning like the devil himself. You okay over there? He teased. Linda glared. I'm moving to Canada. Alan chuckled. You'd miss me. Linda's heart did that ridiculous flip again. Don't get cocky. Alan's smile softened. Not cocky. Just hopeful. Linda blinked, her breath catching. Before she could respond, a delivery truck honked outside, shattering the moment. The boxes were loaded, the truck pulled away, and Linda stood in the doorway, watching it disappear down the road. Her chest felt tight, not with anxiety this time, but something brighter, something that felt like victory. Alan joined her, his shoulder brushing hers. First shipment. Big deal. Linda smiled, her voice quiet. Yeah. Alan turned, his gaze locking with hers. You know what else is a big deal? Linda swallowed hard. What? Alan's voice was low, steady. You. Coming back. Fighting for this town. For all of us. Linda's throat tightened. Alan. He reached out, his fingers brushing hers. Just a whisper of contact, but enough to send a shiver racing through her. I meant what I said, he murmured. You're worth fighting for. Linda's breath hitched, her heart pounding like a drum. For a moment, it felt like the world held its breath. And then another interruption. Linda. Mrs. Jenkins hollered from across the lot. We need more cinnamon rolls. Linda groaned, laughter bubbling up despite herself. Alan chuckled, shaking his head. Timing, he muttered. Linda smiled, her pulse still racing. Tomorrow. Alan's grin was slow, warm. Tomorrow. As she drove home under a sky streaked with gold, her phone buzzed with a text. Howard. First shipment down. Proud of you, Fairmont. Linda, proud of us. Howard, sounds good. Linda stared at the screen, her smile lingering. The launch wasn't just the start of a business. It was the start of something else. Something wild, unexpected, and impossible to ignore. Chapter 12, The Future. Linda stood on the porch of her grandparents' farmhouse, the winter sun spilling gold across the fields. The land stretched wide and quiet, dotted with barns and silos, the same view she'd grown up with, but it felt different now. Alive. The cooperative was thriving. The subscription boxes had taken off like wildfire, orders pouring in from food bloggers, boutique shops, even a few restaurants that had stumbled across their website. Farmers were smiling again. The town had hope. And Linda? She had a decision to make. She sipped her coffee, staring at the horizon. The city felt like another lifetime. Concrete and noise, endless meetings that left her hollow. Here she felt whole. Her phone buzzed. Alan. Howard. Greenhouse expansion approved. Wanna come see? Linda, on my way. The greenhouse shimmered under the pale sun, warm and fragrant inside. Rows of herbs stretched like green rivers, basil and thyme mingling with the sharp sweetness of mint. Alan stood at the far end, sleeves rolled up, forearms dusted with soil. Linda walked toward him, her boots crunching softly on the gravel. Expansion, huh? Alan grinned, that slow, easy smile that made her pulse skip. We're going to need more space for all those subscription boxes you keep selling. Linda laughed. Sorry for being successful. Don't apologize, Alan said, his voice warm. You saved this town. Linda shook her head. We saved it. Alan's gaze held hers, steady and quiet. Fairmont, you staying? Linda blinked, her breath catching. What? You've been driving back and forth for weeks, Alan said softly. But this, he gestured to the greenhouse, the fields beyond. This feels like home for you, doesn't it? Linda swallowed hard, the truth rising like a tide. Yeah, she whispered. It does. Alan's smile deepened, something tender flickering in his eyes. Good. Linda laughed nervously. Why good? Because, Alan said, stepping closer, his voice low. I was hoping you'd stay. Linda's heart thudded. Alan. He reached out, his fingers brushing hers. Just a whisper of contact, but enough to send a shiver racing through her. I meant what I said, he murmured. You're worth fighting for. Linda's breath hitched, her pulse skittering like a runaway train. Alan. And then, of course, an interruption. The greenhouse door banged open, and Mrs. Jenkins barreled in with a tray of cinnamon rolls like a battering ram. Thought you two could use a snack, she declared, oblivious to the tension thick enough to slice with a butter knife. And don't mind me. Just pretend I'm not here. Linda groaned, laughter bubbling up despite herself. Alan chuckled, shaking his head. Timing, he muttered. Mrs. Jenkins winked. Don't let me stop true love, sweetheart. Linda buried her face in her hands. Alan grinned, utterly unfazed. Tomorrow, he said softly, leaning close enough that his breath brushed her ear. No interruptions. Linda smiled, her voice barely a whisper. Promise. Alan's eyes glinted. Promise. Later, as Linda drove home under a sky streaked with pink and gold, her phone buzzed with a text. Howard. So, dinner tomorrow? Just us. No cinnamon rolls. Linda, deal. Howard. Fairmont? Linda. Yeah, Howard. Glad you're staying. Linda stared at the screen, her smile lingering. The future wasn't a spreadsheet anymore. It was a greenhouse, a town reborn, and a man who looked at her like she was the best decision he'd ever made. And for the first time in a long time, Linda believed in happy endings. Epilogue 1 year later. The town square was alive with music and laughter. Strings of lights twinkling like stars against the summer dusk. A banner stretched across the courthouse steps. Heartland Spice Company. 1 year strong. Linda stood near the booth stacked high with spice jars, subscription boxes, and a shiny new logo that read, True Roots, honest flavor from our fields to your table. She still couldn't believe it. 1 year ago, she'd been drowning in spreadsheets and doubt. Now, the cooperative was thriving, orders shipping nationwide, partnerships with boutique grocers, even a feature in a foodie magazine that called their blends a taste of the Midwest reborn. The farmers were smiling again. The town had life again. And Linda? She had Alan. Fairmont. She turned, and there he was, walking toward her with that easy stride that still made her pulse skip. Alan looked good in a crisp white shirt and jeans, sleeves rolled up like always, a sprig of basil tucked behind his ear because apparently he couldn't resist being on brand. You're late, Linda teased, grinning. Alan held up a tray of cinnamon rolls like a peace offering. Got ambushed by Mrs. Jenkins. Linda laughed. Of course you did. Alan set the tray down, his smile softening as he looked at her. Big night. Linda nodded, her chest warm. Huge. Alan's gaze lingered, steady and quiet. Proud of you. Linda smiled. Proud of us. The festival was a blur of congratulations, laughter, and cinnamon rolls, because Mrs. Jenkins had apparently decided they were the official food of success. Linda and Alan worked the booth together, their hands brushing more than once, each touch sending a spark through her like it was still the first time. As the band struck up a slow tune, couples drifted toward the dance floor under the fairy lights. Alan glanced at Linda, his eyes glinting. Dance with me. Linda laughed softly. Deja vu. Alan grinned. Better ending this time. They stepped onto the cobblestones, the music wrapping around them like a warm breeze. Alan's hand slid to her waist, steady and sure, and Linda felt the world tilt. Not with uncertainty this time, but with something solid, something real. You stayed, Alan murmured, his breath brushing her ear. Linda smiled, her voice barely a whisper. Best decision I ever made. Alan's eyes held hers, and for a heartbeat, everything else faded. The music, the lights, the chatter. Then he kissed her. It wasn't rushed or tentative. It was slow, certain, like a promise sealed under the summer stars. Linda melted into it, her heart soaring, her hands curling into his shirt like she never wanted to let go. When they finally broke apart, breathless and grinning, Alan rested his forehead against hers. Took us long enough, he murmured. Linda laughed, joy bubbling up like champagne. Worth the wait. From somewhere behind them, Mrs. Jenkins' voice rang out like a victory bell. I knew it. Cinnamon rolls never lie. Linda groaned, burying her face in Alan's shoulder as laughter rippled through the crowd. Alan chuckled, pressing a kiss to her hair. Small town life, he said, his voice warm with amusement. No secrets. Linda smiled, her heart full. Wouldn't have it any other way. Later, as the music played and the stars blinked overhead, Linda looked around at the town she'd fought for, the town that had fought for her. The cooperative was thriving. The future was bright. And Alan's hand was in hers, solid and sure. For the first time in a long time, Linda didn't just believe in happy endings. She was living one.